This is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We are broadcasting from the Thacker Jewelry Studios, custom jewelry, engagement rings, and more at thackerjewelry.com. Again, I'm Matt Martin. Sitting in with me is Matt Crow, but we have Sheriff Rowe, Sheriff Kelly Rowe, Lubbock County Sheriff. I guess we better say where you're from. But in the studio to kind of tell us what's going on in the sheriff's office. And
y'all have had a busy week. I saw yesterday that there was a vehicle chase and a foot pursuit.
Yep, those types of things are happening all the time. It's just we've gotten to this point. And of course, there was always an element that was not going to ever comply with law enforcement, but we're starting to see it more and more often now. It seems like to where we've got so many more individuals that instead of they see the red and blues, instead of just stopping, of course, 9 times out of 10 they're going to be up to no good. So whether they're carrying dope or guns or doing something or they're wanted, those types of things. Their likelihood to stop anymore is much more minimal. I don't
mean to make light of it, but if you're chasing a suspect in your vehicle and then they stop their vehicle and you've already endangered yourself and other people trying to stop this person, then they get out of their vehicle and they run, and they're rabbiting over fences and through backyards and across streets and then across fences again. As a law enforcement official, doesn't your blood pressure and your adrenaline get a little high because this individual is making you dog them over fences and around trees for 10 minutes?
Well, absolutely. And, of course, that's why we've got all these young guys that can still do all that. You're not going to see yours truly here, getting back over too many fences at this point. It might be
mad. Now I got to chase this guy. Now I got to run and pull a muscle and, all this other stuff.
Well,
I'll tell you, but
that's for.
But that's where the restraint comes in, and that's where we get real proud of these guys real fast is they don't let a lot of that stuff get to them. They still maintain their professionalism. They still affect the arrest. And like I said, we're never going to teach these peaches out there that the one thing they'll never outrun. They can outrun officers. They can even outrun canine, but they're never going to outrun that radio. Mm-hmm. And there's always sufficient folks out there to come in, box them in, and ultimately we're going to get them in custody. So it just like I said, the risk to the public is always our biggest concern when they're doing that. You talk about jumping into fences and everything. What happens when somebody comes over your fence and you're back having a family barbecue and everything else? Yeah. Those types of things are what alarm us the most about it. But it's also the very same reason we want to get those guys off the street and off into a life of incarceration where they're not that risk to the community.
So let me ask you that. I feel like something like this may happen more often than it's reported. But have you had it where you're chasing people and a citizen with a gun's been able to help you stop somebody that jumped in their backyard?
Yeah, it's not so much in the backyard, not off the top of my head anyway. But yeah, sure, we've had. There's been plenty of times we get support from citizens. We've had stories over the years, officer alongside the road, and the suspect becomes combative, and you'll have people stop, may or may not have a gun with them, but they're certainly going to stop and give that officer some assistance.
You changing gears a little bit. You recently attended a conference of border sheriffs. Mm-hmm. Tell us why you were there in the first place, and secondly, what you heard.
Well, the main thing is we wanted to show, as a Texas association as big as Texas is, we wanted to show our support to those guys that are on the front line down at the border. But had a great opportunity, first and foremost, to hear the reports of all the Border Patrol sector chiefs from the entire country. So basically Brownsville to San Diego. And sadly, the reports just weren't good at all. I mean, they're well on their way to exceed 1 million folks illegally entering in this year. They're at that point now where they hit those 20-day limits that they have to do, and then they're releasing these individuals on into the interior. They've got, their biggest, one of their biggest concerns is their facility limitations. So they've got, most everyone, if you're the Yuma, Border Patrol Sector Chief, and you've got a station that's built to handle about 100 people, and you've just got overrun with 450, you have to bring in every available agent you have to come in and process these individuals, deal with the families, providing diapers, medical care, all these types of things. You're closing your interior checkpoint stations, which are really valuable to stopping a lot of human and narcotics trafficking out there. And meanwhile, the guys that are up to really no good, your cartel, activity that's moving the massive amounts of narcotics and everything, they're getting a free pass because there's nobody capable of actually running along the lines.
And they're smart enough to know, and the cartels are the ones moving these people a lot of times, and so they throw them in one place and they go to another place, knowing that the departments are going to be busy.
Well, I mean, it's outlandish to me that you can have these groups of thousands of people moving unfettered through a quote unquote sovereign country. That part right there is the most mind boggling. So they've got the assistance of that, and quite frankly, and to the guys that work in that world every day, and there's part of me that has does have some empathy towards it all, but when you're in a country where it's take the silver or take the lead, you understand some of the dynamics as to why some of that's happening. But again, we're the ones dealing with it as soon as it hits, it hits that U.S. border, and the strains that it's putting on every system out there, and then all the criminal activity that comes with it, which is of course my primary concern.
So they've called it a crisis. Would you call it that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, just imagine, like I said, probably 1,200,000 estimated to cross that border this year. They're well on their way, given their stats from previous years. So, stepping that out over the next 8 or 9 months to get to the end of the year, they're highly confident they're going to get there.
How do you keep morale up in a group of any group, law enforcement, what have you? But I mean, you're a manager now. I mean, that's part of your job is you manage people, and you try to keep their morale up through the business day. But I mean, how do those Border Patrol agents and those sheriffs in those counties that are on the border with all this just breaking over them like a wave? I mean, how do you keep your guys and ladies positive throughout the day?
Well, I think fortunately one of the big things that happens in that equation is that you've got people that got into this line of work for the right reasons. They got into it because their heart was into it, and so a lot of other considerations become secondary at that point. Now, having said that, let there be no mistake, they've got challenges. They've got challenges keeping people. They've got challenges with people being burned out, and some of that. And that's tough to do. And, when you're down there and you're in that setting, everybody that's in the room, all the professionals in the room, know what the problems are. They can delineate out those problems but yet all roads come right back to one central point, which is until Congress will do something, our hands are completely tied. And I think they've kind of resigned themselves to that point now. I think they realize we've got a president that's got a positive message. He's trying to get it done. We're here in Lubbock. We've certainly got a congressman that understands the issues going on. Certainly our state legislators understand it as much as they have to deal with it, and our senators do. But we're, again, a unique spot, and there's still a whole lot of folks up there that either are blissfully, unaware or choose not to, take note of what kind of things this is bringing with it when it comes.
All right, we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Sheriff Kelly Rowe. This is News Talk, 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. I'm Matt Martin. Sitting with me is Matt Crow, and we have Sheriff Kelly Rowe. Sheriff, we were talking about let's see, we were talking about the border problems and the crisis that we're having at the border. And one of the problems that we're having here in Lubbock, I know, is drug trafficking and drugs coming in. And one question, I was actually going to ask you this before we got off of the people coming across. In that 20 days, is the United States, the infrastructure set up to be able to make sure that they're not, we've had these measles outbreaks and whatnot, to make sure that these diseases aren't crossing over with these people?
No, they are. They certainly are. We had tuberculosis, an example, was completely eradicated from the U.S., and now it's made a resurgence back in. We see it out at the detention center all the time. We had to design the just in case special areas with negative pressure cells and those types of things, and they're in use regularly now. And so we see that. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I can't speak to the measles and some of that, but I do know we have a lot of different things that are reentering back in that we've, for years and years had under control. But again, it's just one of those things. We've got these folks coming in where they're not immunized. They may not be showing, actual, symptoms at the point. And then once they're in, those things, all of a sudden manifest themselves, and then we've got, you've got that possibility of exposure.
Mm-hmm. So are they tested is there anything you could do to even stop that?
Well, once when we're talking about
they're
once
already
they're up here
by the time you get there.
We're like with tuberculosis example, everybody's tested, including staff once a year is tested for exposure to that. But every inmate walking in immediately is tested upon arrival and checked within the time frame. Like I said, a lot of the other stuff, those you may not have a ready test that's going to tell you whether you may have a carrier or something like that. Out there, so they have to kind of deal with it as they can see symptoms, appear.
Do you and I don't know that this is, but what percentage of your prison population at any point in time is probably going to be illegal aliens?
Well, we actually, now that we have the 287G program up and going in cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, we're seeing quite a few. That's been up for now a little over a year, and we've intercepted close to 500 or so at this point. And what's truly amazing about that is when you stop and you look at some of the countries of origin, because, the automatic assumption, you want to think Mexico, you want to think that triangle area of Central America, but we've got them coming from all over the place, multiple countries in Africa, Europe, Asia. Like I said, one standout was Kazakhstan. Even had a couple of Canadians, believe it or not. We're not here legally, but nonetheless, of course, these are individuals coming in because they've come into contact with law enforcement under some normal reason. Mm-hmm. Pay close attention to this. What are they coming in charged with? And not surprisingly, narcotics-based charges. A lot of intoxication charges, DWI, and probably most alarming of all is the sexual assault of children. That's another high number for them. But in terms of percentage, we've got it's not really a big percentage when you compare it to the entire jail population. But there's quite a few that we're sitting with detainers on that will be processed depending on how their charges are disposed of in the criminal justice system.
I was looking at some numbers of sheriff's departments around the United States, and the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. You want to guess how many sworn sheriff's deputies are in the Los Angeles? Almost 10,000.
Yeah, I was going to say I would have no idea.
It's the fourth largest police force in the United States.
And they're like the second. One of the interesting things I remember about L.A. is they have like either the second or third largest mass transit system in the country. And they say if there was ever a reason that those buses stopped moving inmates to and from, they wouldn't have any place to put them all, because there's like usually 10 to 12,000 in transit at any time moving.
So in comparison, obviously we're not the size of Los Angeles.
No.
But give us the kind of the quick and dirty numbers right now of the Lubbock County Sheriff's Department.
Well, in terms of sworn officers, that's about 400 total sworn. Our total staffing is 520. Of course, the majority of that, like any sheriff's office, is your jail operation, where in Texas, the sheriff is responsible as the keeper of the jail by statute. So that obviously is your biggest driver of staff. And then, like I said, our law enforcement responsibilities take up that, and that's about 150 or so of the total number.
We talked about management morale earlier. Do y'all ever get together in one big room in one big place all at once, and you come out there like Fidel Castro and give them their marching orders?
I'd like to think it's more like General Patton or something. I don't quite have that OD green
lecture from the balcony.
Not really. That's why we've got an effective command staff, and they get those messages delivered through. I try to get in front of the folks as much as I possibly can, but it's physically impossible to get in front of everybody. Like this week, we're going to be, this whole month is all appreciation, law enforcement, corrections, telecommunicators appreciation month. So this gives us all a great opportunity to get in, see each of the groups by groups as we can. So, Yeah, getting them all in one room is
you
not
rely
possible.
on your command staff. I get it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with Sheriff Kelly Rowe. We're gonna hold you over for a few
I
more
want to find out what he was doing in
talk.
Austin. I never got to the bottom of that.
We'll be right back. This is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. If you want to send us a text, that number is 806-680-2790 if you've got a question for the sheriff. Now, Sheriff, you're not going to answer traffic questions, though, right?
Not one of the big things we do.
I'll tell you what, when the chief is in, when Chief Stevens was in here, we would get probably 20 questions about what was legal and not legal as far as the traffic, which is fine. He actually enjoyed answering questions like that, but that's like you said, that's not as much of what y'all.
No,
deal
with our numbers like they are, we primarily are focused call to call, and so traffic enforcement, we will spot target areas if we've got some problems. We've had some neighborhoods that have businesses and whatnot at the end of the street where we get a lot of speeders, going to run and pick up kids and whatnot, creating kind of safe environment, or an unsafe environment, I should say. But for the most part, no, we just don't have that luxury of doing a lot of traffic enforcement. So,
as the sheriff's department, when y'all do traffic enforcement, not necessarily just in an area, but I know that if y'all see something that's kind of egregious, that y'all will go ahead and stop it.
Absolutely. If we see an unrestrained child is a good example, that's a big safety violation. There's going to be a stop made there. But in terms of doing a lot of speed control, and some of those types of things, that's where we don't get to. But if we see solid safety violations, if we see erratic driving, and those types of things, you bet they're gonna engage with that quickly.
So you were in Austin earlier in the week. I ran into you, and you came in and saw Chairman Burrows. Tell us what you were up to down there.
Well, we of course, obviously it's a busy legislative session going on. I actually was asked to come down for a meeting with Chairman Ford Price on a mental health bill that was catching a little resistance out there, and it's something that's very near and dear to every sheriff's heart because we've got such a high number of folks coming into our jail systems with mental health conditions and issues. So again, I think we were able to do some good down there to get some of that resistance tamped down and get his bill moving through the way it needs to.
And of course, Representative Price is one of his main areas of concern is mental health and so forth. But as far as the sheriff's department is concerned across the state, is it a resource concern? Is it a beds and capacity and getting the people the help that they need and getting them to the place they need to get that help and so forth? So you have someone who comes into the jail with obvious mental health issues versus just your normal scumbag criminal. First of all, how do you identify it, and then what do you do about it?
Well, there's a series of assessments that are going to happen with everybody walking in the door, and we've also got a great system went in place a few years ago that's tied through our driver's license and criminal history database that will, when those are run, which happens with everybody, when that's run, we'll get a hit off of any state mental health services, so the local mental health authorities. And so if an individual has ever received any services, we'll get a notice that comes across. Won't give us any diagnosis or any medical history, but will tell us that they've at least received services. Gives us more of a follow-up to track on that.
Changing gears a little bit, one of the big topics of discussion earlier in the week in Austin was the decriminalization bill. Give us your Reader's Digest version of how you feel about that.
Well, I always come down to the root of decrim on marijuana or legalization in any way, shape, or form. And the core essential part of that is, to me anyway, is if a person can't afford this stuff today, they're not going to be able to afford it as soon as it's legal. And so they're still going to be burglarizing your home, your vehicle, and everything else to get the money they need to do it. And we've seen now enough examples. I mean, the news is terrible about reporting it. I'll be the first to condemn. But you look at places like Denver and Colorado Springs and Seattle. I got pictures from one of my own guys who was on vacation in Seattle. Night and day difference from the late 90s when I went up there. And he said he and his wife were constantly they were either getting bombarded by people or having to walk over people and all these nice public areas that is usually where you want to go see when you're in places like that. And I don't think Texas, they don't realize they don't want that here. They don't want that,
Well,
through
it's an
society.
illegal drug too, though, Kelly, and illegals. It's being brought across the border.
Well, and
And
that's
the
not going to
cartels
stop
are
either.
keeping-
That is not going to stop either. Again, picture it this way: you have your legal store sitting on the corner, and it's by all state laws is legal to sell. And so an ounce of whatever magical stuff is $40 or whatever. That is not going to keep the cartels and your local drug dealers from sitting in the alley right beside it selling, something similar for $35 an ounce.
That was one of the main selling points, by the way, in the California and Nevada legislatures when they decriminalized it and legalized it to some degree, that if you had the dope shops, on the street corners, then you wouldn't have any more organized crime behind moving marijuana around the neighborhoods, but that just didn't happen.
Well, and the other reality is we don't ever it's so rare just to find marijuana. When we find marijuana, we're going to find it with everything else.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How often is it that, is marijuana really the problem coming across, or is it the fentanyl and the...
That's all the big ones. Cocaine, crystal meth, fentanyl, heroin. Those are your big ones that are coming across right now.
That's where the money is, though, for them, right?
Well, there's money in all of it,
Right.
But the simple fact is like I said, it's this misnomer that there's this large number of folks that's all they ever want to do. Heck, this high grade hydroponic that they're growing nowadays. You talk about you can have all the debates you want about gateway drugs, but that stuff is so potent. We have people going in weekly to our hospital district here overdosing on that. And so then you imagine how easy it is to transition to if you can't find the hydro, then maybe meth is a good substitute and it has great availability. Cocaine is still a little more expensive, heroin is still a little more expensive, but crystal meth, they are driving in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds every day.
Well, I thought if you got rid of the pseudoephedrine, it was going to be gone.
Well, it killed it locally, but that didn't keep the cartels from building super labs south of the border, and shipping as much of that as they need from China right directly in with no regulation. Like I said, U.S. did good when they did that, and that's why you don't see local meth lab stories that much anymore because they don't have access to those ingredients. But don't think for a second they don't have the capacity to kick it out.
All right, let's go ahead and let's take a break. We'll be right back. This is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We got a quick question from Tony for the sheriff. Tony, you're on with Sheriff.
Okay, hey, Sheriff. I was wondering, as a parent, if you find something questionable in your home, how do you get it either brought to the sheriff's department or have someone come test it without, your children knowing? And also, I don't want to transport it and have a traffic violation, end up getting caught with it or whatever. I found something that I need to have tested.
Can you ask the first part of that again?
I'll just translate. So as a parent, you find something, let's say in your kid's drawer or something. How do you get it to the police department without having to transport anything?
Well, I would call the police or a sheriff's deputy out, and they'll take it from you. And in those circumstances, that's understandable. That could happen that way. A lot of times I think what we see is a lot of times parents will just discard it, especially if it's marijuana or whatever else, because again, as soon as you bring law enforcement into the situation, do you want that to potentially go the full gamut where we're talking where law enforcement's now sitting down and talking to the child, going through it, and there'd be a potential for other actions to happen there. But if you're concerned about it, I would just call somebody, call law enforcement, have them come pick it up. You can explain to them what it is, where you found it, and they'll take care of it and discard it appropriately.
Okay, so would they turn your child in, or depending on what it is, it's not marijuana?
Well, if it's serious, again, once you involve law enforcement, they could, they're gonna potentially want to follow up on that. But again, some of those decisions are parental decisions, best handled there if you feel like you can handle it. We also see a lot of times where parents have tried to deal with these issues as much as they can, and it's finally bled over to a point where they want law enforcement to intercede and deal with it along those lines in hopes that may finally bring a change to the behavior. But those are decisions, like I said, best made there first, and then, like I said, if you're worried about it at that point, don't want to discard it yourself, then, like I said, you can contact us, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. All right. Well, that's exactly what I needed. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Tony,
No
for
problem
your
at all.
question. Man, and I'm sure that there are a lot of parents that are in the situation where, if I call law enforcement, the police are going to be involved, but if I take care of it myself, are we going to stay in this cycle?
Well, and I think you look at it in grains of how it escalates, because again, there's probably that issue of finding that one joint, first, but then it typically what we see in these cases is it starts elevating to where all of a sudden you've got things being stolen to start supporting that habit. So whether it's jewelry, whether it's silver, whether it's whatever they can get their hands on, try to do it without it being as noticeable, whatever. And then all of a sudden, again, and I've seen this countless times, parents are like, enough's enough. You need to get help, or we've got to do something differently. We can't sustain this. And then, as I always talk about in these types of situations, it just escalates, and it's why when we get into these conversations about some of this being victimless, and a lot of these people are just poor users out there. We'll do everything we can on the backside to get them past the addiction and try to get them back on the road to being successful. But there is a path of victimization that has occurred to this point. It usually starts with the parents, then moves to close friends, then goes to strangers. And that's, like I said, that's your burglaries and your robberies and your identity theft and all the different types of fraud that they commit, all with the intent of supporting this habit. That, like I said, and going back to Matt's question, does not go away just because you start either decriminalizing or legalizing some of this, or getting to a point, because it's a slippery slope. And once you start with one, it's going to move right on down the path.
So one of the things that she had mentioned is that she wanted to have if you find something, you want to have it tested. Is that something that you can do, or do you have to bring law enforcement, get it involved?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can actually get testing kits. I'm not 100% sure if that's something you can pick up on a shelf at Walmart, or at Walgreens,
or Amazon,
or something. But I think you can.
Actually, I think I saw something like that in Walgreens.
And I think if I'm, like I said, I'm not mistaken, I think those are now out and available, and that's kind of the intent is a parent can get a hold of that, test and see if it's oregano, or if it's the real deal. But I'd have to confirm that to be 100% sure, but I think that's right.
Speaking of, just the whole marijuana issue, a couple years ago, Councilwoman Gibson made a big drive towards the synthetic marijuana. How's that coming along now in the community? We still see it? Or?
Well, that's always been a huge challenge to figure out, and I've never understood why it's been so difficult to criminalize. I know we got down into the nitty-gritty of the chemistry in it, and they would alter the chemistry, and suddenly it wouldn't fit the legal definition any longer. It's still out there. We don't see it just as much because of the prevalence of other things, and we've got some other tools we can use now that can hit those distributors so hard in the pocketbook that it makes it real risky for them to want to try to keep selling that stuff in any real abundance, because again, I think one of the last things we saw some civil penalties at like $50 per unit type of deal. You'll shut one of them down if you get your hands on them.
All right, well, we're going to go take a quick break, and we'll be right back with the last segment with Sheriff Kelly Rowe. This is News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. We did get a text during the break over about marijuana use only, and one of the things that we were talking about was how many people are in your jail right now with marijuana only charges.
Very, very minimal. Probably less than 5 to 10, if there's even that. And there's, generally speaking, going to be more to that story than just the marijuana. But in terms of what we see, what our narcotics and any gang guys are seeing all the time is when they come in contact with it, they're coming in contact with everything, all the other products. I'm not dismissing the fact there's a few people out there that like, smoke an occasional, bit of marijuana. But again, that's not the target of law enforcement. We're not expending resources on trying to find those individuals. And our officers have the discretion, when they come across it like that, to deal with that without an arrest. And in most cases, that's what you see happen.
Okay.
I've got a question for you, off the subject a little bit. 9mm or 45?
45.
Why?
That's just always been that's the military coming out in me, and that's what I've carried since I first started in this business. And now I have had some guys sitting there talking up this new 9mm, and we'll see. I'm going to let them see if they can prove the point.
I had to get that in because it seems like every time I look at a magazine article about different handguns and ammunition, it's always the 9mm community and the 45 caliber community. So Kelly Rowe is a yes on the 45.
That's it.
There we go. All right, Sheriff, thank you for coming out.
Absolutely my pleasure, guys. I always enjoy it.
Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Matt Martin. Sitting in with me is Matt Crow. We'll be right back after these messages.